All right, we will go ahead and get started. Um, my name is Ashley McCormick, and I'm the coordinator, not coordinator, they changed my title. Let me try to get it right. I'm the director of personalized digital instruction for the district. So we wanted to spend some time together this morning talking through some of the best practices around playlist, since that's kind of our structure for instruction, and especially asynchronous instruction during remote instruction. So if you see me turning and looking during today's meeting, just know that I'm trying to monitor the chat on a separate screen over here. And so that is why I keep turning my head to the side, just to make sure that questions haven't been thrown out there that I missed. So not that I'm looking at my phone or anything. I'm trying to monitor the chat as well as talk to you all today. So I'm going to share my screen for a little bit. I am going to try to wrap up about 5 minutes early, because if you're like me, staring at these screens for long periods of time really messes with me, and I need to take a break and step away. And so we're going to try to wrap up about 5 minutes early so that you have a break before your next session. So we are recording this session, and it will be uploaded to the personalized learning website under the PD section. So if you need to reference it at any point, please, it'll be there for your reference later as well. Any big questions before we jump in and get started? Anybody? Everybody hear me okay? I always made fun of my nephews because they are big gamers. And so now I have my big headphones on too, so I can listen. I do not believe we have deactivated the Summer of Learning course. I think the plan has been to leave that active. I can go in after this and check on that for you though. But I don't think that our plan is to leave that active throughout the school year so that teachers can go back and reference it. And teachers will get PD credit for it. Right now, we're just trying to, they're still letting the dust settle. We have some teachers that are still going through there. And if I need to, I can send you to the direct link to the course. So no big deal. After this, if you'll just shoot me an email, I can get that out to you. All right. Like I said, I'll be monitoring the chat as well. So feel free to use it or raise your hand, and I'll try to get to any questions that you guys have. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Today's presentation is interactive. If you've been in any kind of PD with me, I like to ask questions and give you processing time. I like to model that. So there'll be different activities built in along the way today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. So we are going to be talking a little bit about playlists today. And if you think about our framework for teaching and learning, playlists fall under that categorization of differentiated and personalized. Really, the idea of playlists were introduced through our personalized learning initiatives throughout the district. Some of you may or may not have PL leads within your building, have been within our program for the last several years. And so your level of comfort or familiarity with things like playlists and pathways, you may have some familiarity based on the fact that you have PL leads in the building or not. And so really, as teachers become more comfortable with the implementation and the use of playlists, we want to see them beginning to design those with students in mind so that they do meet the individual learning needs of our students. And so I want to start out with just a review for you all, kind of to test to see where we're at. So if you'll type in menti.com, and then it'll ask you for a code, and that code is on the screen there. It's 6979 36. And you can do this on a phone, absolutely, or you can do this, you can pull up another tab and type it in there as well. But I want to give you just a moment to type that in. And I'm going to leave that code up for just a second. Okay. And if you didn't get the code, it's going to be at the top of the screen. And like I said, you can do this on a phone, you can do it on a tablet, or you can pull up another tab on your computer. And so first question is pretty easy. How are we feeling this morning? How is everybody feeling? So those of you that are a little sleepy this morning, I can commiserate with you. I'm almost into my third trimester, and so sleep is something that is something I always want to do, but doesn't come as naturally now that I'm a little bit bigger and awkward. So totally understand that. I hope that some of you had the opportunity to kind of rest and rejuvenate, and so it seems like some of you did. Those of you that are ready, and those of you that think really in the world, absolutely, I agree. All right. So here's my next question for you all. When we utilize the word playlist, and I'm sure you have heard it to the point you are tired of hearing it, but when we say that word in regards to personalized learning and remote instruction, how do you define that term? What does it mean to you? We're not talking about a music playlist, but when we talk about personalized learning and remote instruction, how do you define the term playlist? All right, so lots of good answers coming in. Um, so I see the word standards align has come up multiple times. Um, some people have mentioned things like a checklist, the list of activities. Um, some people have mentioned the word self-paced, which I really like. The idea of asynchronous has come up multiple times as I've scrolled through to see different people's answers here. a syllabus style document, lesson plan for students. Okay. Many people have mentioned the idea of like either must do, may do's, or choice boards, menu boards, things like that. Student friendly. Words like activities, assignments has come up multiple times. All right. So one last question for you. During the Summer of Learning course, teachers were introduced to 4 non-negotiables of a digital playlist. So I want you to take a minute and add those 4 non-negotiables. What do you think they are? This isn't graded, it's totally anonymous. So go ahead, and what are those 4 non-negotiables of a digital playlist? I'm sure you can say them in your sleep by now. All right, so you should see those words continue to kind of rearrange themselves there on the screen as more people add their thoughts. But this is a word cloud, and so as more and more people enter the same words, you'll notice that those words kind of come to the forefront and that they're larger. And so you'll see that there are 4 of those that really stick out. Learning target, content, process, and product. And those are indeed our 4 non-negotiables as we talk about a digital playlist. And so we're going to dive into those a little bit more today and kind of give some best practices. There are some other great words as you look around this word cloud. You'll see things like individualized, differentiated, you'll see content-based, standards-based. You're going to see some of those words. Choice, practice it, prove it, task, asynchronous. All of those are important as well as we talk about those digital playlists. But when we talk about those 4 non-negotiables that we've asked all teachers to include in their digital playlist, there are those big 4, the learning target, a content, process, and product piece. So at its simplest, most of you were correct. A playlist is just a sequence of resources and or activities for students to complete. We do want our playlist to follow a logical learning progression. And so one of the things that we saw in the spring was that teachers kind of struggled with that a little bit. They would put up multiple reading passages or maybe multiple videos on the same target, but there weren't processing opportunities embedded throughout like we would naturally see in a classroom, or hopefully that we would naturally see in a classroom. And so we wanted to provide teachers with a structure that kind of helped with that process. And as we talk about those 4 non-negotiables that you hit the nail on the head earlier, there are just a couple things to kind of keep in mind as we start talking about those 4 non-negotiables. And so a learning target is one of those. That learning target should absolutely be derived from standards. And we want to make sure that our learning targets aren't just teachers copying and pasting the standards, but we want it to be written in student-friendly language so that students as well as parents know the purpose for learning for that day. There's a ton of research out there from Susan Brookhart, Marzano, and others around setting a purpose for learning. And so that's really the idea behind those learning targets, is that it should set the purpose of what those students are doing that day, and everything that follows in that playlist should be aligned. We've asked for teachers to include a content component, which is just your instructional component. That could come through the form of some synchronous instruction. Maybe the teacher starts out with synchronous instruction and delivers the content for the day. That could also be delivered through videos. That could be delivered through text, infographics. There's all different ways out there to deliver content to students. Processing is something that we want to make sure that all students have the opportunity to practice and process new content. And so we wanted to make sure it was an explicit part of our playlist design. Because even as we do classroom walkthroughs in a normal setting outside of a pandemic and remote learning, we often see that teachers will go long periods of time talking to students without providing some of those processing opportunities. And so we wanted to make this an explicit part of our digital playlist, is that we're stopping intentionally and allowing students to practice, play, or get messy with that content. We also want some type of opportunity for students to demonstrate their learning. That could come in a variety of methods. That could be a flip grid. That could be an exit ticket that students do, a Google form, a drawing. It could be all different kinds of things. Kids manipulate some kind of different manipulatives at home and snap a picture. But we want to give students the opportunity to demonstrate their learning so that we can then use that data to inform our instruction as we move forward. And so I want us to take a minute with that in mind, thinking about the purpose of a playlist and our 4 non-negotiables. And I'm going to throw out an example for you all. Let me grab this link right here. And I'm going to put a link in the chat for you all. I'll put it back on the screen as well, just in case there are some of you that cannot access the chat. My computer always moves slow when I'm sharing my screen in Teams. So I just put that link down there for you. It should be in the chat now. And I will make sure it's back on the screen just in case you're not able to access that chat. But what I would like you to do, and I'm going to set a timer just to kind of keep us on track, is I want us to take about 3 minutes. I want you to look at that example of a playlist. This is an elementary playlist. These elementary students are looking at the sun. And I want you to think, based off of the non-negotiables that we talked about, you all threw them out there and hit the nail on the head, and you kind of the purpose of what a playlist does. I want you to think what this playlist does well, and maybe where it needs some improvement, where you may give feedback to that teacher. So I want you to take about 2 or 3 minutes. I'm going to set a timer. And then I'm going to ask you to throw some of those suggestions in the chat once that timer goes off. So take just a couple minutes. I'll minimize this little screen right here so you can see what it says. And just full disclosure, some of the hyperlinks might not work because this was a copy of something a teacher did. All right, take about 1 more minute just to kind of think about this. If you want to go ahead and start typing in the chat, but don't hit enter just yet. All right, so if you want to go ahead and start throwing those ideas out there, things that they did well and things that might need improving upon. All right, so as I look over some of your comments, one of the number one things that you all have picked up on is the fact that there is no clear learning target for this particular playlist. Absolutely, I don't see one either. Many people have picked up on one of the positives is that there is choice embedded throughout, either in the fact that you can read or watch a video, even in the types of books maybe that are there. So that's a positive. Some people have mentioned the lack of processing or clear and explicit processing opportunities embedded in this particular playlist. And then some of you have also picked up on the fact that it has said things like go to Google Classroom or go here. And you referenced the fact if you would rather have it be linked there explicitly. I think that's a key point of you that you picked up on just to make it easier on our students. They do have an exit ticket there for students to fill out to show some of their learning. So probably not a bad first attempt at a playlist, but definitely some coaching points that can happen within this playlist. Ways to make it better for students and parents alike. Absolutely. And so we've kind of touched on this just a little bit. Really, as we think about the purpose of a playlist, especially during remote instruction, it is to help guide those students on a logical learning progression. Playlists are being utilized during that asynchronous part of instruction. And so we want to make sure that whatever activities are embedded there really enhance that learning process and that it's helping students meet that learning target. And then as we think big picture of where playlists might allow us to go, when we think about personalized learning as a whole, that umbrella is huge. And it includes things like student data tracking, competency-based education, genius hour, student choice and ownership, differentiation. All of these types of things live under the umbrella of personalized learning, and playlists are a foundation that every grade level, every subject area K-12 has that we can build on to start implementing personalized learning in all of our schools. And so it really does serve a purpose in remote learning, but it serves a larger purpose as we think about shifting instructional practices overall. And so I want to share with you just a couple tips and tricks as we think about where do we even start coaching teachers, right? Because we know that it doesn't matter if you're a first-year teacher or a 20-year veteran. This year is a hard year for our teachers. And so for some of our teachers, it's like the first year all over again. And so we all need support. And so I wanted to share with you a couple of tips, tricks, things like that, help make these playlists more than just a checklist. I know somebody referenced that in the Mentimeter, that really we want to get to a place where we're differentiated and that these are meaningful, but right now they're just kind of a list of assignments. And so we want to make these relevant learning experiences. And so how do we do that? So one of the first things that we want to work towards is alignment. Our standards should guide the creation of these playlists. And as we design those learning targets, our assessments, various activities embedded throughout, all of that should be aligned to those standards so that there is no gotcha at the end of a playlist when students are asked to demonstrate their learning. There was tight alignment throughout, and so that logical learning progression should lead them back and allow them to meet that learning target, whatever it is. And so during the Summer of Learning course, teachers were introduced to a planning document. By no means do teachers have to use this, but as you're working within PLTs, some of the activities that are contained within the planning document may be very beneficial for teachers. And so when we think about learning targets and designing effective student-friendly learning targets, we want to think about those standards that we're being asked to taught. And one of the things we had teachers do is highlight the nouns in blue and the verbs in yellow. So that it really stuck out to teachers what and how things are being assessed within those standards. And to also think about that idea of backwards design. If this is our target and this is our standard, how are we then going to assess this? And then from there begin to design our activities. So sneaking in the idea of backwards design within the planning document was kind of intentional to get them to think about that. And so if you didn't go through the Summer of Learning course and you're not familiar with this planning document, there may be pieces of it that might be beneficial to pull out and use during a PLT as you're creating some of those digital playlists. And I can definitely throw the link in the chat as well to that planning document. Like I said, my computer moves a little slow. Maybe it might. We'll see. All right, and if you will, make sure that you mute your mics. All right, for those of you that asked for that. All right, so alignment is really important as we start designing these playlists. But one of the other big things, and probably one of the most important things, are our students. And so as we begin designing playlists, we want to design them with our students in mind. I'm sure if I ask you to raise your hand, most of you would be able to say yes, yes, yes. For the first 2 weeks, our teachers got students in and got acquainted with the technology, but they also did some get to know you activities and team building activities as well. And those activities can be very, very powerful as you start planning instruction. And so when we start asking students things like, what's your interest and hobbies? How do you learn best? Do you like it when it's quiet, or do you prefer music to play? All of those things can be incorporated into the planning process as we roll out these digital playlists. Under the umbrella of personalized learning, we talk about learning profiles. which it takes a lot of information that are already gathering on students, but kind of centralize, puts it in a centralized location so that when teachers are in PLTs, they can go back and reference that. So if a student's really into Minecraft, they might be able to pull that out and embed it within a playlist. Or if students are really into race cars, or they're really into this character, we can pull out those tidbits of information and embed it within a playlist so that it becomes more relevant and engaging to our students. Also, one of the things to make this a better experience for our students is to solicit feedback. And I've seen this done from kindergarten all the way up through 12th grade, either through the use of emojis and things like that, or written feedback, depending on the age of students. But asking students what they liked, what they didn't like, what went well, using that information to then turn around and help plan future playlists. When you're starting to involve students in that process like that, you're incorporating that student voice. You talk about the effect size on instruction, it goes way up. And so soliciting that student feedback, making it part of the process can be very beneficial in making these playlists more relevant for our students. And then last but not least, thinking about differentiation and how we can build that in. I know that teachers right now are very overwhelmed with all of the remote instruction and that transition, the new learning that's happened. But as teachers become more comfortable with this framework for delivering instruction, thinking about how they begin incorporating either student choice or differentiating by learning profile or readiness level, we tried to be very deliberate about the language that we chose when we were rolling out playlists. There is a reason we chose content, process, and product. And it was really to build the bridge and build that connection to the work of Carolyn Tomlinson around differentiation. And so as teachers become more comfortable with this model, and even as you have high flyers that kind of go above and beyond highlighting some of that, sharing out those resources, we really want to use these playlists as a starting point that then we can differentiate and really build in student ownership and things like that to meet the needs of our learners. And so just a couple of other tips and tricks and reminders. One of the big things that I think about, especially for our younger learners, is consistency. And so some of you mentioned the phrase practice it, show it, prove it, those kind of things. So if teachers are using phrases like that, talking with teachers and reminding them to keep that phrasing consistent throughout their use of playlists. Don't switch it up midstream and things like that. Try to keep it as consistent as possible so that so those words indicate to students what they should be doing. It should provide a clue to them what is happening in that particular piece of the playlist. Same goes with images, icons, and symbols. We want to try to keep those as consistent as possible throughout the use, throughout the playlist. And so if teachers are looking for places where they might pull some of those examples, the Canvas Commons has some of those buttons that are already created that teachers can pull out and use in their classes. If they're looking for icons that maybe they can take that are free to use, the Noun Project is a great resource to kind of clue teachers in on. And if you've never checked it out, it's a great resource and it's free. They've even started integrating it. You can add it as like an add-on into like Google Slides and things like that. And they provide really clear just icon buttons. We use them in a lot of ours, and that's called the Noun Project. So that's a good one to share with teachers if they're looking for something that will provide them with some of those consistent icons. We also want to think about appropriateness. And so when we think about these playlists are really designed, and they're really being utilized during that asynchronous component, which means that oftentimes students are working through them independently or with the help of a parent. And so we want to make sure that those activities are designed in a way that students can work through them independently. So making sure that the directions are concise and explicit. If you have younger students, maybe providing a video that reads aloud to them or something of that nature so that they can access those directions. Also thinking about the strategies and the technology tools that we utilize. A playlist is probably not the appropriate time to introduce a new strategy or tech tool if it has not already been discussed and modeled during synchronous instruction. We don't want students to become and parents to become so frustrated because it's constantly new. We want to model some of that previously before we ask students to do it independently. Also thinking about time, we want our synchronous and asynchronous for there to be a balance, and thinking about that typical school day schedule, the length of a class period, or the length of time you would spend in a particular subject area. We want that to be balanced. And so as you think about that, kind of keeping that in mind as we design some of these activities that students are working through independently, that we don't want them to have to go back later or things like that. We want that to be an appropriate amount of time so that it does mimic a normal class day or class period. We also want to make sure that we're chunking our activities. So whatever we put out there for students to do, we want to make sure that we're providing brain breaks. Movement is one of those things, K-12, it's a hill I'll die on. All kids need to get up and move. There's tons and tons of brain research about that. So making that an intentional part of the process. Move It is for older students. It's a Google extension that can be added that kind of reminds students to get up. I have mine installed. Embedding some of those SEL activities, some of those mindfulness activities are all things to kind of keep in mind as we're working with teachers to design playlists. And just one last big picture type of thing is everything doesn't have to be digital. And so I know that we've referenced these as digital playlists, and yes, they are accessing them through Canvas, but there is nothing wrong with a piece of paper and a pencil or crayons or markers or whatever the case may be. But allowing students to process some of that non-digitally may be just as appropriate. And they could always go back at a later time and snap a picture or do a video recording that explains what they did offline. But if you look at things like thinking maps, there's a lot of brain research around having students actually write or draw those to build that metacognition. And so having that balance between digital and non-digital is going to be really important for our students. I did promise you I would let you go 5 minutes early so that you guys can kind of take a mental break and debrief. And so one of the last things that I will ask of you, I'll put this slide back on the screen in case some of you cannot access the chat, but I'm going to throw an exit ticket into the chat as well. It'll cooperate. And as you kind of shut down and leave this meeting and transition to your next breakout group, if you will click that for me and just leave some feedback so that in the future, as we design professional development, that we can best meet your needs. And so that's all that is. If you don't have the chat, like I said, the bit.ly is right here on the screen. So if you'll, before you head to your next meeting, if you'll take just a couple seconds to click on that, and to fill that out for me. And we'll utilize those types of things as we plan our next session. Thank you guys. If y'all have big questions, we still have about 4 minutes. You can unmute your mics or you can throw questions in the chat. But we're trying to kind of catch some of the big picture ideas so we can plan future PD for you as well. Thank you guys. So Heather, the presentations will be in the it'll be in the team. It'll be linked in the files, but on each one of these pages was also a bit.ly. Would have been nice, right, Heather, if I'd mentioned that. If you want to snap a picture of that bit.ly, it'll track that presentation as well.
Thanks. I see it now. Thank you.
Well, it would be nice if I'd mentioned that to begin with. So, But yeah, anyone that wants access to the slide deck, it will be uploaded to the team. But if you want to snap a picture of this bit.ly right here, it'll get you access before. Yeah, so we do have some exemplar playlists at all different grade levels. We're trying to roll out our personalized learning Canvas course. I'm trying to get that up and rolling. And so as that is rolled out, I can shoot you all an email and it will have some of those exemplars on it. So I was just going, Katrin, I was going off of what Dr. Lupton said earlier, is that she's going to add all of these resources to the team. So I'm not sure if there is going to be a Canvas site or page. She had emailed us and told us to share so that she could upload them there. So. All righty.
I'm sorry, Ashley.
Yep.
Can you tell me where you said this was going to be again? I forgot.
So this slide presentation should live in the Microsoft team that Dr. Lupton created. We have to share all of our slide presentations with her, and she's going to upload all of those to that team.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Awesome, Katrin. I'm glad you found it beneficial.